Hi class! Welcome to our flipped classroom. Before this week's class period, I wanted you all to refresh your memory about some of Shakespeare's plays that we've read this semester, especially The Taming of the Shrew, and what we're going to do today and later this week is apply it to something we call plot structure. But before we get into that, let's take a step backward and figure out why we even care about Shakespeare today. What I first want to do is let's take a look at these three movies. They're all very different with different characters and different storylines, but they all have one pretty important thing in common. All of these movies are based on plays written by Shakespeare. So we have Romeo and Juliet, which is pretty self-explanatory, but what you may not have known is that the movie 10 Things I Hate About You is actually based off of Taming of the Shrew, and the movie She's the Man is based off of one of Shakespeare's plays called Twelfth Night. And just to be clear, yes, we're talking about this Shakespeare. And so, Shakespeare's plays are always being rewritten and reimagined, and tons of them have been turned into movies. I know a lot of students tremble at the thought of reading Shakespeare, but what a lot might not realize is that a ton of today's storylines come from his plays. So now you're probably thinking, what makes Shakespeare so relevant today? A lot of people think that the answer to this question is Shakespeare's language. Let's take a look at this quote from The Taming of the Shrew and see what we think. At this point in the story, we see Petruchio talking to Kate, and he's trying to woo her. And this is basically what he's saying in Shakespeare speak. You lie in faith, for you are called plain Kate, and bonny Kate, and sometimes Kate the cursed. But Kate, the prettiest Kate in Christendom, Kate of Kate Hall, my super dainty Kate, for dainties are all Kates, and therefore, Kate, take this of me, Kate of my consolation. Hearing thy mildness praised in every town, thy virtues spoke of, and thy beauty sounded, yet not so deeply as to thee belongs, myself am moved to woo thee for my wife. Well, that was a mouthful, and considering how difficult that was for me to read, and probably for you to hear, I think it's safe to assume that Shakespeare's language is not the reason that we care about him so much today. And even though we know he's famous for his creative words, Shakespeare's even more well known for his plots, and that's probably why we still like his stories. So, what is a plot anyways? This graph shows us the 5 elements of plot. First we have the exposition, followed by the rising action, the climax, the falling action, and then finally the resolution. These 5 plot elements make up something that we call Freytag's Pyramid. Let's break down Freytag's Pyramid a little bit more by looking at the Taming of the Shrew's modern version, 10 Things I Hate About You. Make sure you take notes on this section and answer the questions so we can talk about them in class later this week. First up is the exposition. At the beginning of the play, we learn a lot about who the characters are and how they're related. For example, as we know at the beginning of the Taming of the Shrew, we learn that Bianca is not allowed to marry until her older sister Kate finds a man to put up with her sass. We also learn that they live in a town called Padua. This is where, in the opening scenes, we meet all of the characters, and this is what we call the exposition. So, in general, now that you have heard what we've talked about a little bit about the Taming of the Shrew, what kind of general information do you think the exposition tells us? At this point, I want you guys to just get out a piece of paper and a pencil. You can pause the video if you need to, and just write down a few ideas about the exposition in general and what kind of information it could reveal. After the exposition comes the rising action, and this is where the real stuff starts to happen. It's during the rising action that in the Taming of the Shrew we discover a conflict or a complication in the lives of the characters. So this is the part of the play that we see Petruchio devise this plan to woo Kate so that his friend can have a chance with Bianca. And all of this action leads up to something that we call the climax. The climax is the part in the story that I like to call the point of no return. It's in this scene that Kate discovers what kind of man Petruchio is, and she's devastated and disappointed. And because of this discovery, Kate begins to resent him, and who can blame her? The intensity and emotion of this point in the play is at the highest that it has been and ever will be. And this is the main characterization of the climax. After the climax, we see the following action, and this is where the play starts to wind down. So, all of the action, all of the scenes that follow this very intense moment are technically called the following action. And at this point, we see characters have to make some tough decisions after the emotional intensity of the climactic scene. And it's at this point in the Taming of the Shrew that we see Kate and Petruchio actually begin to mend their relationship. And so all of this action that happens in this part of the plot leads to something that we call the resolution. And this is the last element of Freytag's pyramid. The resolution is basically a conclusion. And so it's pretty self-explanatory. I know a lot of you probably already know what a conclusion is, but let's talk about it anyway. This is where all of the loose ends in the story are tied up. And as we know is characteristic of Shakespeare's comedies, there's a happily ever after ending. And so in The Taming of the Shrew, we see Kate and Petruchio find a way to make their marriage work, and they end up actually being the happiest couple at the end of the play. So this is a pretty familiar plot structure to us, since a lot of the stories we grew up reading and hearing follow it, like our fairy tales, our favorite movies, our favorite books. But plots aren't always so simple, and sometimes they look like this. So all of the little loops that you see on the graph there are called plot twists, and they actually occur more often than we think. In fact, there are a few plot twists in The Taming of the Shrew that I have left out of the presentation so far. So at this point you're probably wondering what a plot twist actually is, and where in the world they occur in a story, especially in Taming of the Shrew, since we haven't even talked about them yet. And don't worry, I didn't lie to you, I promise, but there are some plot twists in the play that we're going to talk about later. But first, let's try to get a grasp on what plot twists actually are. So, a plot twist is what we like to call an unexpected change of events. For example, getting a snow day in May would be a pretty serious plot twist for you all, although I'm sure you'd enjoy it as much as I would. And in literature, just like in real life, a plot twist changes how the characters feel and how they act, and they can be both good, like the snow day, or bad. Plot twists can actually occur anywhere in the story. So they can occur at the beginning, they can occur after the climax, they can even occur more than once. And a lot of Shakespeare's plays have multiple plot twists throughout them, and that's what makes his plots so complex and so unforgettable. And basically, anywhere that you feel that you have predicted something to happen, and the plot shifts and changes in a way that completely changes that, that's probably a plot twist. So now, knowing what you do about plot twists, let's try to brainstorm any that we can think of that happen in The Taming of the Shrew. They can be at the beginning, they can be in the middle, they can be at the end. This is one plot twist that I came up with. So at the beginning of the play, we see Kate very stubborn, very independent, and it seems that she is just not going to fall for any of Petruchio's games. But by the end of the play, we see them in a very happy marriage. And so this is something that I personally didn't expect to happen. I don't know if you did, but how about you guys take a second to, again, get out your piece of paper and pencil and write down a point in The Taming of the Shrew that you might call a plot twist. Please don't use the same example that I did, and there are no wrong answers right now. I just want you guys to really get thinking about what a plot twist could be. So were there any points in the play that you expected one thing to happen and something else did? If so, write it down and be ready to share this week in class. So a quick review before we end the session for today. What we talked about is Shakespeare is an innovator of plot structure and plot twists. So even though he's known for his language, his plot structure is really what keeps him relevant today. Also, I want you guys to make sure you have a pretty good grasp on the 5 elements of plot. So that's the exposition, the rising action, the climax, the falling action, and the resolution. Also, I want you to think about the purpose of plot twists. We're going to really talk about this more in class this week, but I want you to start thinking about how plot twists make you feel, what the purpose of them is. And to really get that brain process started, what I want you to do is think about your favorite book or favorite movie and talk about how the 5 plot elements of Freytag's pyramid fit into your story. So what I want you to do is write a brief paragraph about how the plot of your favorite book or your favorite movie fit into these 5 elements. And then I want you to think about, are there any plot twists in the story? So if something super unexpected happens in the story, jot that down and describe to me how it makes you feel and how it was different than what you expected. And so before class this week, please type up a 1 to 2 paragraph response about the plot of your favorite story. I can't wait to hear what you come up with, and I can't wait to see you later this week.